Let's take a minute to hear a word from our sponsor for this week's Ag Report, Elite Tire.
Elite Tire and Automotive. Ever have one of those days and just need a little hand? Well, with our remote services, we'll just hop right on it. Get you back on the road quick and easy. With automotive services to cover all your mechanical needs. Need that state inspection done? Well, we can do that too. So roll on in and see a friendly face. Give us a call and we can be right on the spot to assist you. So trust the friendly folks down at Elite Tire and Automotive, 972-775-1055.
Now let's join our host, John Paul Dineen, in the studio with this week's Ag Report.
Howdy, folks. Welcome to this week's Ag Report. So we're in the middle of wheat harvest. Yes, we are a little bit late due to the rainfall that we had through May and into the first part of June. Ground's been too wet, but it's underway. And had somebody ask me, said, well, tell us what grain harvest looks like. So we're going to talk about wheat harvest a little bit and kind of what it looks like, what happens when we go to the grain elevator, what that used to look like, what it looks like now. So you may be driving around Ellis County and notice that there are groups of tanks kind of, coming up. Some of them have a leg, we call it, or an elevator next to it. Those are little, some people call them country elevators. Anyway, grain elevators that we sell our grain to. It's a place to store it until it moves. And so when I started, the main places that I hauled into was in downtown Waxahachie, under the viaduct, the old viaduct there. We would haul into that elevator. I'd also haul out on 77 and FM 55 to the grain elevator there, or sometimes I would haul out to Rocket, across from the Rocket Cafe, to the grain elevator there. Just depending on where my fields were, you wanted to try and go to the closest elevator that you could. Now, in those days when I started, it looked a little bit different than it does, today. So most everybody hauled with a bobtail truck. So it looks a little different than it does today. Everybody hauled with a bobtail truck. Now, in those days, most of the bobtail trucks were single axle on the rear end, and they'd hold about 18,000 pounds, something like that. I started with a wagon, and then I moved from a wagon that you pull, a four-wheel wagon. I got a hydraulic dump trailer that would haul about 18,000 pounds. And then I moved from that to a bobtail. Now, my bobtail had two axles on the back, and it hold about 34,000 pounds, something like that. And so most of the guys had bobtails. There were quite a few of those two-axle bobtails back in those days. Very rarely did you see a semi. Every once in a while, you would see a semi truck. Usually that was a custom cutter that had come to town to help somebody out. But the elevators were mainly set up for the bobtail trucks. A lot of those trucks didn't have a hydraulic dump, which meant there was a platform and a winch that would have to raise the trucks to dump and then lower them back down. The couple of those trucks were basically lumber trucks that sides had been built for them to hold the grain. And so they'd been, converted or repurposed, that kind of stuff. And at that time, what that would look like, so it was pretty common in the evening hours, about dark. That's kind of when everybody, was running good, got their loads all to town. So it was nothing to pull down there under the viaduct and be a line of bobtails coming all the way back. So it looks a little different than it does today. That rail park wasn't there. That street wasn't there. You actually came in the parking lot where Fresh Coffee is. That was the road. And Fresh Coffee, that depot was storage for the feed store and that kind of stuff. But we would be lined up back past that depot right there to, I guess that's Rogers Street in there. And so there'd be a line of bobtails going all the way in. The scales were right there on the right-hand side of the original feed store building to the right. And so we'd pull in through there, and they would probe the truck. By probing the truck, they're taking a sample to kind of get an idea of what your grain looks like. They're going to test it for moisture and test it for bushel weight. We drive on back, make a U-turn there at the back, and dump over the pit, and then, do the process again. You get back on the scale, weigh out, and then head back to the field. And there would usually always be rail cars lined up under the leg there on the little siding. And so they were loading that grain off into rail cars, shipping it out. Really don't see rail cars used anymore. It's probably 10 or 15 years ago. The rail company quit accepting grain onto the rail line. And so it's all kind of truck. Same thing out on 77. So the hike and bike trail used to be a railroad, and it would go all the way out there. It went all the way, way on down to Hillsborough and stuff. But they would run rail cars out to 77. So we would pull into the elevator out there, and it was, pretty common to have trucks lined up out there on 55, waiting to get in the dump. You'd still pull in and get a sample and everything. And the old pit was right there on the railroad. You came in to the left and went by. They've since built a new pit. Now you might chuckle, the new pit was built 15, 18 years ago. But to those of us that were around in those days, it was the new pit and the old pit. And so it still is to some of us. When they tell us to go dump, they'll say new or old pit. Now, the new guys, I don't know what they call it. They have a different name. But anyways, we kind of date ourselves a little bit, I guess. But that's kind of what it would look like. Now, in those days as well, there would usually be a chalkboard in the scale house, and that would tell you the price for that particular day on the commodity, whether that was corn you were bringing or if you were doing wheat harvest or what have you. So you could kind of go in and you could see the price that they were offering, at that time. And then, of course, it wasn't digital or anything like that. They had a sliding bar scale, and they had these little rectangular tickets that they would stick in there and hit, and that would stamp that weight. It had, carbon paper in there, and that would stamp that weight, and then they'd keep one and you'd keep one. You had to, keep up with all those tickets. They still do tickets today. It's just electronic, little computer printer, prints them out, that kind of stuff. But that's what it looked like. And it was very important you kept all your tickets in there, because that was proof that you dropped off that load. And when you got your settlement sheet after the end of the crop, then you went back and you made sure that all those tickets got added to your load. Because, depending on the price of grain and depending on how big your truck was, that was quite a lot of money. One little unique thing I remember, this was, I think it was in 1995 or 96. I remember we were in the line there, and we were doing wheat harvest. And over winter, wheat had gotten really high, the highest it had ever been. I think it hit $8. And I remember with some of the older guys in these older bobtails, there were several 50 model bobtail trucks, 60 model bobtail trucks, lined up in the line there. And I remember some of them guys, he says, well, this is the first time in my life that the load of grain in the back's worth more than the truck that I'm driving. And that was because of the price in there. And I always remember that, that they were hauling a load that was worth more than their truck for the first time. So, but anyways, just thought I'd kind of give you a little glimpse into what a trip to the elevator looks like. It's kind of one of those things again, before cell phones, before social media, that's where you got your information. If you had a combine breakdown or something like that, they would try and get to a phone or something and tell the scale house, so that when your truck got there, the truck knew, oh, well, go get a part, or, meet here back at headquarters or something like that. Because if not, they were going to go to the field, and there may be nobody in the field. They got no way of knowing, what happened or where it was. So that scale house was kind of a little hub of communication of what was going on. And it was also where the elevator would tell you what time they were going to close that night. And so the truck driver was charged with the duty of going back to the field and telling the farmer, the combine operator or whatever, that, okay, this is the last load, or they're going to take one more load, or they'll be open till 10 o'clock, something like that, And so that's how that flow of information worked. So it was really important, those scale houses, passing notes back and forth. And then, of course, you get in line, and you might be in line an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. So you're catching up with the other truck drivers, what you making, how's things going, did you have a breakdown, that kind of stuff, just kind of chit chatting. So anyways, just another little tidbit there of what it used to look like when you went to the elevator and kind of waited in those lines. And maybe you drove by and saw some of that traffic and you wondered, well, what in the world are all them folks doing there? Well, that's kind of what we were up to. Y'all take care.